So I'm going to look at the short answer questions in the OCR Micro paper from 2017 for AS level. There is a separate video on the multiple choice section, so this is just going to be the short answers in this video. So I'm just going to scroll down. So with OCR you get a passage to read, you usually get a graph of some sort or a diagram, but there's not as much as other examples to read. And you'll find a lot of the time you can answer the questions without reading the passage, but there's just at least one or two questions where you will need to read the passage. So it's worth reading the passage probably after you've looked at the questions. So look at the questions and then go to the passage so that then you know what you're looking for. So what economic term is used to describe pollution and congestion? So that's just a key term. So you could say negative externalities, or you could say costs to the third party. So I've got the mark scheme over on the other side. So cost, negative externalities or cost to the third party. So either of those is acceptable. Part B, explain what is meant by derived demand. Now, you've got to be quite careful when you explain this, because when this was done in the actual exam, a lot of people gave definitions which made it sound like a definition for complements. So complements would be tea and milk. So when you have tea, you have milk with it. They're two goods that are consumed together. Derived demand is where one good is derived due to the demand for another good. So for example, the demand for wood is derived due to the demand for tables. So if you look over at the mark scheme over here, it says when the demand for one good is dependent on or determined by the demand for another. So that would be one definition. Some textbooks use this second definition, demand not for its own sake, but for what it produces. If you said a factor of production produced goods and services, then they were allowing 1 mark for that. But it's better just to learn the definition and to get the definition accurate. So it's demanded due to the demand for another good. So think about wood and tables as an example. Right, so this is where you need to use the case study. The next question, use information from the case study, identify 2 factors. So it says here identify, so you don't need to explain, you just need to identify, and you need to do 2. So this is a really short answer question. You need to go to the passage and you're looking at 2 factors that led to an increase in car travel over the period shown. So I've just underlined a few things, and some of them are relevant for the other questions. So we've got an increase in the number of cars and vans, we've got population has increased, we've got GDP has increased. So that's 3 things just after reading it fairly quickly. Right, next one, this is a definition question again. Explain what is meant by the term income elasticity of demand. Now, this is often answered slightly incorrectly. So for your definition for elasticity of demand or income elasticity, it's responsiveness of quantity demanded due to a change in income. That's going to get you 2 marks. A lot of candidates say it's change in income compared to change in demand. Now, don't ever use the word compared. What does that actually mean? It's all about the responsiveness. So how much does demand change when income changes? We know that for most goods, when income goes up, demand goes up. But what we're looking at is how much does it go up by? Does demand go up by a little bit? Does demand go up by a lot? So responsiveness of quantity demanded due to a change in income. So here is the definition. If you gave the formula, then you could get 1 mark, because remember the question actually says explain. And a key thing that you need to make sure you remember is it's quantity demanded, not quantity. Okay, so don't just put the word quantity, because if you just put the word quantity, then you'd only get 1 mark. Similarly, in the formula, if you put percentage change in quantity and not percentage change in quantity demanded, you would actually not get anything for it. you need to make sure you've got quantity demanded in that formula. Right, the next one is a little bit confusing. It says use information from the case study, so you do have to read the case study for this bit. Calculate the effect of a 10% fall in bus fares on bus travel in the long run. So what that's meaning is what's going to happen to the demand for bus travel. So we've got a 10% fall in bus fares, and we need to work out what's going to happen to the demand for bus travel. So we need that formula. PED is percentage change in quantity demanded over percentage change in price. Now this question is quite unusual because they're telling you that the fall is going to be 10%, and then you've got to figure out where all the numbers go. So we've got a 10% fall in bus fares, so that's going to go on the bottom, and it's a fall, so we're going to put a negative there. Now we need to go to the passage for the information. So we're looking at what's happening to bus travel in the long run. The passage talks about the long run and the passage talks about the short run. So just here, it's saying the price elasticity of demand for buses is minus 0.36 in the short run and minus 0.7 in the long run. So if we go back here, we know that is minus 0.7. So what we can do is we've got 10 times by 0.7, or minus 10 times by minus 0.7, which is going to give us 7%. And you need to make sure you've got your percentage there as well as the 7. Then you need to look at what's going to happen to the demand for car travel. So we've got bus fares and car travel. So that's looking at XED. So XED is a percentage change in quantity demanded of good A, and good A is going to be car travel because we're talking about the demand for car travel, over the percentage change in price of the bus fares. So again, we know that the bus fares is gone down by 10%. So let's scroll up to the passage, and we're looking for the XED for bus and cars in the passage. And here we have it, this line here. So the XED between bus fares and car travel is minus 0.1. So we can put that in here, equals minus 0.1. So then we can do minus 10 times minus 0.1, which is going to give us 1%. Right, so explain using an appropriate diagram the likely effect of an increase in population on the market for bus travel. So this is saying explain, and the clue is in the question, although it's not always that obvious, but you've got a space for a diagram and you've got some lines. So that means you do have to do some explanation. So we'll draw our diagram, we'll label it P and Q, and it's fine to label P and Q. You can do price and quantity if you wish, but P and Q is fine. Then we'll go S and D, in fact I go S1, D1, and we put in our original price and quantity, so P1, Q1, and then we've got an increase in population. If we have an increase in population, that means there's more people to demand the good, so the demand curve is going to shift to the right. We've got a bigger market, and that's going to increase the price to P2 and the quantity to Q2. So that's what's happened. And for your diagram, if we look over to the left-hand side, the diagram says up to 3 marks for a correct diagram. Correctly labelled axes, demand curve shifting to the right, new original and new equilibrium points. So we've got all of that on the diagram. So we've got the 3 marks. And then you've got an explanation. An increase in population may increase the demand for bus travel. It's not really much of an explanation, but it's an explanation. Or you could say price and quantity has risen. So you don't actually have to do very much. So yeah, there's not too much involved in that question. You could actually be fooled into thinking you have to write a lot because they've given you all of these lines to write on. But it doesn't mean you've got to do lots of writing. It's just because they might as well fill up the page with lines rather than leave it blank. So those are the short answer questions. The next question is a 10-mark question, which I'm not going to look at in this video.